Hey guys, the clock is ticking. In January at the East Tennessee Fishing Show, we will be giving this boat away to one lucky winner. Link is in the description below or pinned in the comment section and also on our website, tbnation.net. Make sure you register before the giveaway time. Hey guys, welcome back to the little retirement mini-series that I have for a few select vintage boat builds that I did years back. Boats that actually started this whole thing started now, and I'm just retiring them, bringing them back because the videos back then were really cringe. So now we evaluate what went good and what went bad and just how they came into being. This one was the original yak killer. A lot of people think that my 12-foot tracker topper is the original. It is not. I took the entire series of this boat off YouTube for a while just because of complications with the boat and other things. But right now I just want to focus solely on the boat. I think its story is pretty epic, and I want to talk about the pros and cons of what we did and what we were able to accomplish in this. What lasted and what didn't. Because this layout, as early and primitive and budgetish as it was, set the ground for everything that I think a yak killer should be. So let's talk about how we did the frame. We did a wood frame, but it was redwood, and it was significantly lighter than its pine stud equivalent, in so much that it equaled that of an 1/8 inch aluminum frame, like pretty decisively. And you could just overlay it. So I always used 1x2s as joiners in between the hatches over the studs and laid it in like that. And we had this whole little thing where we trended carpet around that. Looking back, that was a terrible idea because all that did was just saturate water right on the wood. It didn't repel it. But we also did the core. We did the dry lips. And we added these square totes. They weren't HDPE, but they were symmetrically sound. That way you could stick boxes in there and there wasn't problems. They were like from Staples, and they were really fragile, but they were the best boxes if you were going to get symmetrically square liners that would fit 90 series tackle boxes in there without having to taper out and flare out and mess up all the angles of the framing. And I think the bulk majority of flotation for this boat was sadly pool noodles. Now, pool noodles we know are complete garbage. They don't do anything really for the boat. I mean, they add some flotation, but there's too many voids and rough spots and the degeneration of them when they sit in the water or they sit in the sun. But back then, I tell you, for a boat that contoured, that wasn't symmetrically flat like a John boat, and we had no idea what to do for flotation, pool noodles really suited the bill because you could just stack them on top of each other and they just cheaply laid in there like straights. And so we thought they were the best thing ever when we couldn't actually make a straight line because this boat was completely contoured. This boat got built right after my 1648 John boat, and I wasn't terribly impressed with how heavy the aluminum was when I stacked it in there. So the chance to make a redwood core, which was my running theory that you could make a wooden core lighter than the aluminum frame, at least how we were framing it back then, and this absolutely rang true. I mean, conjunction with the wood in here. Also, there was a lot less material going into this boat than there was before, but I tell you, the full kit in the boat, that was about as heavy as the boat was going to get. There was just going to be a little bit more carpet and some lights and, like a bow plate. At dry weight, the boat was extremely light, and 2 people could pick it up and haul it in the truck. It was really wide in some sections. For a 12-foot boat, it was very stable. The owner used to stand on it with no butt seats and fish, and he would slay. And we also did manage to stick quite a bit of storage in here. We had 2 full boxes plus a terminal stow. We had a little day box on the right and a complete rod locker on the left, and still an area for a live well and the gas tank. This was a true portable bass boat, the first, and it was seriously epic because back then we just had creative ideas and not a whole lot of skill and not a whole lot of working knowledge of what materials lasted versus didn't last. We initially wired this boat with all kinds of wiring connectors from Home Depot, and we bought a few fuse blocks from Amazon and ran those in there. I know that the wiring was not great and that we didn't know it was gonna fail, but it did fail about 6 months or so later. I think within a year, that whole wiring that we did, this whole thing, we had to redo the entire thing. I wanted to shoot myself. But what was kind of cool about it was the way I wired it all into that little makeshift electric box right there. It was fairly elegant, and it was fairly painless to rewire the boat. It had some sort of concept that conduits to make a serviceable boat was what was needed. The bunk carpet was like a magnet for hooks, but it was marine grade carpet with a rubber backing, and we did love it because it was just what we had at the time. What we didn't have was a live well. What were we going to do for a live well? We're going to stick a live well in this 11.5-foot boat. Where? In the back? Yep, we did. In fact, this is the first time we actually plastic welded a tote together. We cut that tote. It was like a 17-gallon or 27-gallon tote or whatever. We cut it in half, get to the whole thing, use the overlaying pieces on top to make an overhanging catch lip. Then we welded that together with a propane torch and spatula, I think. Oh yeah, and a soldering iron. We used that to kind of refine the edges. Somewhere down the line, we actually made a working version that held water and didn't explode. It actually did fail once, and then we fixed it. And it was the most bootleg hack job. Didn't have any mesh in it. it still worked. And it was like we were never going to find a box like that. We looked everywhere, and we didn't have the capability to weld or bend sheet metal or do any of that stuff, or any concept of riveted together boxes like stuff that we have now in our store that would have just completely solved this problem. This is what we did, ground zero, with all those screws right into the wood and still some yoga mat there to try and give it somewhat of a cosmetic measure. And then we were using the Y-gate as a pump out, aerator / pump out like mechanism. Everybody was using the Y-gate. Ryan from Fireant Fishing actually did the Y-gate mod first, and I just simplified it from using PVC to getting a little garden hose fixture that hooked up right into a 3/4 inch jack. But it all did well. It aerated, it caught the water wasn't splashing everywhere. He actually stuck a ton of fish in that thing. I couldn't believe how many fish he would stick in it. It was obscene. And the splash test worked just fine. It was that concept that I really understood, that a live well kind of needs an overhanging lip to make the water circle right back into itself when the boat is just doing its thing on the water. There are a lot of people out there making John boat to bass boat conversions, some of them pretty skilled tradesmen and even some craftsmen, but none of them up until the point of what we were doing was following like a max efficiency model where you were absolutely trying to max out the whole boat. It was like a few symmetrical hatches here and there and a deck, and then, nothing terribly extravagant, but it was all functional and nice looking. But nobody back then was trying to max out the boat with crazy stuff. Like, nobody had these things inside a 16-foot John boat, let alone a little 11.5-foot dinghy. I mean, kayaks were the biggest thing. Everybody was like, ooh, look at the newest plastic kayak. And then I was over here trying to make a portable bass boat that would just destroy them. I will say that I would have never honestly taken this project if he'd actually told me the real size of the boat. He just showed up with the best attitude ever in my front yard with this boat, and he had taken it on a wide angle camera, and I thought the boat was much bigger than it was, and he showed up and I was like, what am I going to do with this thing? I don't know what to do with this thing. But it's always these seriously uncomfortable situations that make you have to solve problems that I've grown the most. And I've just learned over time as a man that you should always want problems to solve. Always. If you think you're going to strive towards some sort of happy ending with no problems, it's the biggest lie. There will always be problems, and you should always want problems. And that is the story of the life of a man. Problems always. And in the midst of solving problems and sets, you find peace. And the peace is worth much more than any sort of happiness. The biggest lie that society sells you, try to be happy, find happiness. What a load of shit. If you ever wondered how I got to where I was today, from an office job, the most bootleg beta male office job ever, to becoming this. It was a final admission and acceptance that there will always be problems no matter what you strive for. So if you strive for happiness, you'll just result to selling yourself out to impulsive, low-class forms of pleasure and nothing else meaningful. But if you truly want a meaningful life, then you'll go out on your shield. You will go out of your way to find problems and solve them to obtain peace. This boat gave me so many problems, but in trying to make it epic, the first of its kind, I did finally start to find peace in myself through achievements and milestones. And this is why I have not stopped, and why I will never stop, finding problems and trying to solve them. Best of luck, guys. See you out there. Tight lines.